Battlestar Galactica is the show that tried to bring the spectacle of a blockbuster movie onto a weekly television screen and nearly bankrupted a studio doing it. But the version that aired almost never made it past the lawyers. Did you know George Lucas tried to kill this show in court before it ever premiered?
Wait a minute.
Or that the robotic Cylon warriors marching across your screen were actually out-of-work basketball players sweating inside plastic armor? Today, we're uncovering 15 hidden truths about Battlestar Galactica 1978. And buried inside this space opera are strange connections to Star Wars, Star Trek, Knight Rider, and a piece of Mormon scripture hiding in plain sight.
You just don't understand, do you?
Yes, I do understand.
The original ending killed the villain. In the film's ending, Count Baltar, the traitor who sold out all of humanity, lives. He's spared, handed command of a Cylon warship, and becomes the snarling human face of evil that haunts the entire series. But the original ending was completely different.
I am to be
spared.
Before Battlestar Galactica was a television series, its 3-hour pilot was first cut together as a standalone movie and released in theaters in Canada, months before the show aired in the United States. And in that original theatrical version, Baltar doesn't get a warship. He gets executed. He's brought before the Cylon Imperious leader and beheaded on the spot, halfway through the story. So why is he alive in the show? Because once it became clear the series was actually going to be made, the producers realized they'd just decapitated their best villain. They needed a human face for the bad guys, a black hat audiences could hate week after week. So the execution scene was quietly re-edited. A new ending was filmed where the Imperious leader who ordered Baltar's death is killed in the explosion of the planet Cylon, and his successor spares Baltar instead, sending him off to chase the human fleet across the galaxy. Earth's most famous traitor wasn't written to survive. He was resurrected in the edit bay because a dead villain is no good for a weekly show. Star Wars took it to court. Before audiences ever saw the Galactica fleeing across the stars, the show was already fighting for its life in a courtroom. In 1978, 3 months before the series even premiered, 20th Century Fox and George Lucas filed a lawsuit claiming Battlestar Galactica had ripped off Star Wars. To prove it, Fox's legal team laid out a list of 34 specific similarities between the two. From a roguish hero, to a wise old mentor, to a desperate band of survivors fighting a faceless empire of soldiers in identical armor. Here's the twist most people don't realize. The lawsuit dragged on for 5 years. It outlasted the show itself. The case climbed all the way to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals before both sides finally settled rather than risk a trial. So one of the most expensive shows in television history spent more time in litigation than it ever spent on the air. The same hands built both universes. Here's why George Lucas was so furious. It wasn't just that the two shows felt alike. Some of the very same people who built Star Wars had quietly walked across town and built Galactica. The concept artist, Ralph McQuarrie, the man who designed the look of Darth Vader, the Stormtroopers, and the Star Wars galaxy, also contributed designs to Battlestar Galactica. And the visual effects were led by John Dykstra, the wizard who had just won an Oscar for Star Wars, now running his own company, Apogee, staffed with alumni from Lucas's own effects house. So when Lucas looked at Galactica, he wasn't just seeing a copycat. He was seeing his own collaborators using the same revolutionary techniques they'd invented for him, building a rival. That, more than anything, is what truly stung. The Cylons were basketball players. The Cylon Centurions, those gleaming chrome soldiers with the single, sweeping red eye, needed to look inhuman, towering, like over 6 feet tall, every one of them identical. So how do you fill an army of 7-foot suits? Glenn Larson didn't hire stuntmen or dancers. He hired a team of out-of-work professional basketball players. The armor was made of lightweight plastic engineered to look like heavy metal, raising the actors to a menacing 7 feet on screen. But there was a price. The suits may have been light, but they were brutally hot, and the players could barely see through them. The next time you watch a row of Cylons marching in eerie, stiff unison, remember, that wasn't robotic programming. That was a basketball team, half-blind and sweating inside plastic shells. It was the most expensive show on television, and that's what killed it. Glenn Larson didn't want Galactica to look like a TV show. He wanted it to look like a movie every single week. And to do that, he secured a budget that was, at the time, completely unheard of, roughly $1 million per episode. That was more than double what a typical primetime series cost in 1978. It made Battlestar Galactica the most expensive series ever produced per episode up to that point. And here's the cruel irony. The ratings weren't even bad, but no budget like that could be sustained week after week. The very ambition that made the show spectacular is exactly what made it impossible to keep alive. After a single season, the network pulled the plug, not because nobody was watching, but because the show was simply too expensive to exist. There's Mormon scripture hidden in the script. This is the secret woven into the show's very DNA. Glenn Larson was a devoted member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and he quietly threaded his faith all through Galactica's mythology. The fleet's lost mother world is called Kobol. Read it carefully. It's an anagram of Kolob, which in Mormon scripture is the star said to be nearest to the throne of God. The survivors are governed by a quorum of 12, echoing the church's own quorum of the 12 apostles. And in the show, marriages are referred to as sealings that bind couples not just for life, but for all the eternities, a concept taken directly from Mormon temple doctrine. So beneath the laser battles and space fighters, Battlestar Galactica is one of the most successful pieces of religious allegory ever smuggled onto primetime television, and most of its audience never knew. It was almost called Adam's Ark. The title we know was never the original plan. Larson had been developing this story since the late 1960s, long before Star Wars existed. His working title carried the religious themes right on the surface. He wanted to call it Adam's Ark, a Noah's Ark fleet of survivors searching for a promised land. But by 1977, a little film called Star Wars had detonated at the box office, and the studio wanted in. Larson was pressured to drop Adam's Ark and work the word star into the title to cash in on the craze. The result of that compromise? Galactica got the word Battlestar bolted onto the front of it. The iconic name we've known for decades exists only because a studio wanted to ride George Lucas's coattails, the same coattails that would soon drag them into court. Muffet the robot dog was a real chimpanzee. In the show, young Boxy's beloved pet is Muffet, a robotic Daggett built to replace the dog he lost. A mechanical animal, a machine, except it wasn't. Inside that furry robot costume was a live chimpanzee, a trained chimp named, fittingly, Evolution. The suit was a clever piece of engineering, a foam core wrapped in faux fur and silver panels, with motorized ears and a mouth driven by servos and operated by remote control. But the performer scrambling around inside, giving Muffet that twitchy, oddly lifelike energy, was a real primate. So one of television's earliest beloved robot pets was, in reality, a chimpanzee in a fursuit. And almost no kid watching ever suspected a thing. The pilot's helmets came from ancient Egypt. Look closely at a colonial Viper pilot's helmet, and you're not looking at the future. You're looking thousands of years into the past. Costume designer Jean-Pierre Dorléac based the iconic gold helmets on the Nemes headcloth, the striped ceremonial headdress worn by the pharaohs of ancient Egypt, the same shape you see on the famous mask of Tutankhamun. The sweeping side panels that flare back from the pilot's face are a direct echo of that royal Egyptian silhouette. It fit the show's whole hidden thesis. that humanity's origins, its gods, and its iconography all trace back to a single lost civilization among the stars. The Egyptian styling wasn't an accident. It was a visual clue. These warriors were meant to look like the descendants of pharaohs, carrying ancient majesty into deep space. They invented fake swear words to outsmart the censors. The colonial warriors curse constantly. They shout "frack" in the heat of battle and dismiss nonsense as "felgerkarb." It sounds like alien slang. It was actually a loophole. Network television in the 1970s had strict FCC rules against profanity, with real fines attached. So the writers built an entire vocabulary of invented expletives. Frack, felgerkarb, snitrag, words that carried all the punch of cursing without breaking a single broadcast rule. According to director Richard Kalla, frack was literally coined on set as a stand-in for the real thing. And here's the connection that ties the decades together. When Battlestar Galactica was reimagined in 2004, the writers kept frack, and it exploded into a pop culture phenomenon, splashed across magazines and merchandise. A censor-dodging trick from 1978 became one of the most famous fake curse words in television history. The Cylon's red eye became a talking car. That single, hypnotic red light sweeping back and forth across a Cylon's face is one of the most recognizable images in science fiction. But its most famous appearance isn't even in Battlestar Galactica. Glenn Larson, the man who created the Cylons, went on a few years later to create another hit show, Knight Rider. And when it came time to design KITT, the artificially intelligent talking car, Larson reached back to his own playbook. The red scanner that sweeps across the front of KITT, pulsing left to right with that distinctive electronic sound, is a direct homage to the Cylon eye. So an entire generation that never watched a single Cylon march across the screen still grew up staring at their visual descendant mounted on the hood of a black Trans Am. The eye never died. It just changed vehicles. A TV episode invaded movie theaters. Here's something almost unheard of. Battlestar Galactica's 3-hour pilot, Saga of a Star World, was so expensive and so cinematic that the studio did something rarely tried with television. They cut it into a feature film and put it in actual movie theaters. To recoup those staggering costs, the theatrical version was released in Canada before the show even aired in the United States, and later opened in 400 American theaters in 1979. Some screenings even using Sensurround, the rumbling, theater-shaking sound system built for disaster blockbusters. So a story that millions watched for free on their living room televisions was, at the same time, selling movie tickets on the big screen. It blurred the line between television and cinema in a way the industry simply wasn't doing in 1978. A TV show confident enough to charge admission. It out-affected Star Wars. This is the detail that makes Lucas's lawsuit almost understandable. For the pilot episode alone, John Dykstra and his team created over 300 separate visual effects sequences. To put that in perspective, that's roughly 15% more effects shots than the original Star Wars A New Hope contained, before Lucas went back and added more in later re-releases. A weekly television show in its very first episode packed in more spectacle than the movie that had just redefined the blockbuster. The team built 45 separate spacecraft models and pioneered effects work that, frankly, had no business being on a TV budget. And that's the paradox at the heart of Galactica. Technically, on a pure effects per minute basis, it briefly outgunned the very film it was accused of imitating. A Star Trek producer helped raise it. Battlestar Galactica is often framed as Star Wars' rival, but its real creative roots reach back to a different franchise entirely: Star Trek. In the show's earliest development, going all the way back to the late 1960s, Glenn Larson was mentored on the concept by Gene L. Kuhn, one of the most important producers and writers of the original Star Trek, the man who helped shape the Klingons, the Prime Directive, and much of Trek's moral backbone. So the show that fans love to pit against Star Wars actually carries the fingerprints of Star Trek's own DNA. Galactica's earnest themes, survival, faith, the search for a promised home, the moral weight behind the action, owe as much to the quiet influence of a Star Trek veteran as they do to the laser-blasting spectacle of Star Wars. The bargain bin revival that killed the dream. When the network canceled Galactica after one season, the fan outcry was enormous. Letter-writing campaigns, protests, even reports of heartbroken viewers. The studio listened, sort of. The show came back as Galactica 1980. But here's the catch. The original had been canceled for being too expensive, so the revival was made on a drastically smaller budget. Most of the original cast was gone. The fleet finally reached Earth, but the stories turned to clumsy time travel plots and child super scouts, all squeezed into a kid-friendly early evening time slot. The magic was gone. Audiences rejected it, and Galactica 1980 was canceled after just 10 episodes. It stands as a cautionary tale. The very thing that made the original special, that reckless, expensive ambition, was the one thing the revival couldn't afford. They saved the show by stripping out everything that made it worth saving. And maybe that's why it never truly died. It was sued, canceled, revived, and canceled again. And still it kept finding its way back. If a story refuses to stay buried, no matter how many times the world tries to end it, maybe it was never really about the spectacle at all. Maybe it was about the search. Let me know which hidden truth shocked you the most. And if you enjoyed this journey through Battlestar Galactica's forgotten history, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.